Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Untangle Your Business from Copper Wire Phone Lines. I'm Jennifer Getz, the Editorial Director of Facility Executive Magazine, and this webinar is presented by Ooma. Before we get started, I'll cover a few housekeeping items. Your speaker will be on video today for this presentation, and if you would like to view him at the top of your screen, look for the bar in your window to pull down so they are visible to you. Next, please note the control panel on your screen. This is where you can submit questions via the question box at any time. There will be a Q&A portion after this presentation, so please type your questions in there to send them to us. If at any time you experience a technical difficulty, please send us a message via the question section and someone on our team will answer you privately. Also, please note the orange arrow on the left side of your control panel. Clicking on that arrow will either expand or collapse the control panel, so please be sure the panel is expanded so you can access the question box. And if you are interested in continuing education credits, please note that you'll receive a certificate of attendance in an email from Facility Executive after this webinar. You can report to your association for the credit. Now I'll introduce your speaker for today. Chris Burgy is the VP of Corporate Development for Ooma. He is responsible for mergers and acquisitions, strategic partnerships, and driving Ooma's strategy for Enterprise Unified Communications as a Service, or UCaaS. Prior to joining Ooma, Chris was Vice President of Corporate Strategy at ShoreTel. Hello, Chris. Thank you for being here with us today.
Oh, thank you, Jennifer. It's a pleasure to be here and have the opportunity to present on copper lines. And so with that, before we hop into discussing the current situation, we like to level set, understanding what attendees are experiencing in their own environment. So we have a poll to help us understand what you're seeing today.
So how familiar are you with the analog sunset and POTS replacement? Select one of the following. Either you're very familiar, somewhat familiar, never heard of it, or I'm not quite sure yet. You have about 20 to 30 seconds to respond. Okay, so the results are in. So the vast majority are somewhat familiar, 52%, followed by never heard of it at 26%, then is very familiar at 13%, and then I'm not quite sure yet is 9%.
This is some great information and really common with what we see in the market. There's a variety of different levels of awareness of what's going on with the plain old telephone system lines here in the US. And much of this has been set in motion a number of years ago, going back even as far as a decade. There's been discussion of turning down that old copper network, primarily because it's really expensive to maintain for the incumbent carriers, and frankly, it's pretty aging. A lot of that infrastructure was put in place decades ago. And so you fast forward to a few years back now, and the FCC actually issued some orders that set this whole process into motion. And those orders actually provided two different reliefs, if you will, for the incumbent carriers here in the US. The first is they actually allowed for the deprecation or the sunset of the copper network, but at the incumbent carrier's pace. So there's no mandated time frame that this needed to occur by. It's really up to each carrier like AT&T or Verizon or Frontier, for instance, to decide when they want to shut the copper network down. The second piece of that order, and the more important one, is it provided something called forbearance for the carriers. So historically, these copper lines were actually regulated in terms of the price that they had to be sold at out in the market. And forbearance lifts all of that regulation. And so now it's up to the prerogative of each carrier what they want to charge for these old copper lines that are out there. And the reality is this has created a situation that's forcing a lot of attention, frankly, for folks. So there are carriers that are in fact turning down copper lines. That has been happening around the country, again, at a very different pace between the carriers. But more importantly, especially in the last year or so, we've seen unprecedented price increases for those existing lines. So it's very, very common for us to engage with customers who have a bill coming up or a contract coming up on renewal, and their price triples or quadruples. So where you'd see POTS lines typically in an environment previously that may be $40 to $80 a month, it is very common now to see customers paying between $400 to $600 a month for a single line. And we've seen some exceptional examples of over $1,000 a month for a single POTS line. The issue is a lot of the easy devices that have been needed to migrate have already done so. And so what you're left with is a whole bunch of what we call specialty devices that a lot of organizations really haven't wanted to migrate, but now they're being forced to do so because of the deprecation in some instances, more importantly, because of the sheer cost of maintaining these lines. Similarly, the carriers have been underinvesting in this network for years now. So where the old copper network was considered highly reliable, that's no longer the case anymore. And part of that is the aging infrastructure, the aging copper in the grounds, and a lot of the technicians retiring that have worked on this equipment for years. So it's common to run into environments where lines just stop working and the carrier refuses to fix it, or you have weather events like rain, and so it degrades the quality significantly. And so it's really prompted a desire by many organizations to look for alternative solutions. As you think about these types of devices and POTS lines in your environment, they run through a whole smattering of different types of devices, and in particular, some that impact life safety systems. So it's very common to see elevators, for instance, needing a copper line. Code actually requires that you have a voice line serving that for emergency purposes. Fire panels are another wonderful example that are regulated. And so your local fire inspector comes into that environment. So there are very specific requirements around how you have to serve those fire alarm panels in your environment from a compliance perspective that are important, because you may run into a scenario where the local fire inspector actually issues a fine for being non-compliant. And we've seen some circumstances with elevators and fire panels that were out of compliance, and the local fire inspector actually revoked the certificate of occupancy for that building. In addition, it's very common to run into commercial burglar alarm systems that are still operating over copper lines, gate phones, blue light safety phones, various door entry intercom systems, for instance. We've seen a smattering of different types of sensors out there, like CO2 sensors, for instance, down in the boiler room. And of course, traditional voice use cases like fax machines that you still have in your environment, on-premise phone systems that still leverage POTS lines. So the reality is we have millions of these devices that still exist that are operating over copper lines that need to be transitioned as this phased deprecation occurs, and more importantly, to generate a great return on investment for companies as the underlying carriers dramatically increase the cost of these lines. So next with that, we'd like to get an understanding of what you think your environment looks like via a poll question.
So how many devices at your business do you think will likely be impacted? Select one of the following: less than 50, 50 to 100, 100 to 500, or way more than that. You have about 20 to 30 seconds. Okay, so the results are in, and it looks like less than 50 is the vast majority with 57%, followed by 50 to 100 at 30%, then 100 to 500 at 10%, and then very small amount, way more than that, is 3%.
And so this is also very common for us to see, and it really helps us understand the scope of organizations that are being impacted. It's everything from the very smallest businesses out there that may have one or two lines in their environment to large Fortune 500 companies that may have thousands and thousands of lines. Organizations of all sizes are trying to figure out, how do I really approach transitioning away from this legacy network infrastructure for my voice lines into something a bit more modern and reliable? And so you think about the options that you have out in the environment today. The first is you can just park your decision effectively, and you continue to pay ever increasing costs. And the carriers are using these price increases as a forcing function, to be honest, to try to incent folks to move away from that copper network so they can effectively shut it down. So while kicking the can down the road is certainly an option, do expect increasing costs each year as you come up on renewal for your agreement. And bear in mind that there is a risk that those lines either could have an issue and they're not repaired, or the carrier provides notice, oftentimes that 60-day window, that they're going to turn off those lines, and you will have to find a solution. The second is you can actually approach this from a device level. So if you look at fire alarm panels or commercial burglar panels, you can replace those devices and upgrade them to alternative cellular solutions called communicators, for instance. But that necessitates a really big expense because you're buying a brand new panel for that environment. And then you have to project manage a rollout of replacing all of the panels. A little bit easier if you have 1 or 2 panels, dramatically more complex if you have hundreds of properties or hundreds of locations where you need to complete a project. And then the other option is looking at POTS replacement solutions, a much more modern approach to converting this over to digital communications, if you will, often over cellular and wireline networks. So these solutions, POTS replacement, are designed as effectively a drop-in replacement in your wiring closet is a good way to think about this, where the end devices actually terminate into a POTS replacement device that converts it all over to digital communications. And then it traverses over the cellular network, over the wireline network, with an aim to hopefully make this as easy as possible to facilitate the migration. The great news is you don't have to do anything with your end devices in that environment. As far as they're concerned, this is the same POTS line that they've been plugged into for years. They can't tell any difference whatsoever. So it makes it a lot more elegant and seamless approach to transitioning lots of devices in your environment away from those copper lines. So looking at how to approach a POTS replacement solution, we like a 3-phase process that we recommend that really helps organizations understand what's going on in their environment via an audit, selecting a solution, and then rolling through the installation process to convert over those devices. The audit process is actually really important for a lot of environments. You wouldn't be surprised how many companies haven't looked at this in years, frankly. And then you come down to an issue of, well, what is actually using POTS lines in my environment? How many lines am I actually paying for today? And so going through that audit process, a good thing to do is take a look at your bills, understand what you're actually paying the carriers today, so you have a concept of how many lines overall may be in your environment. And then it's important to actually locate those lines and understand where they're terminating in your buildings, where you would need a POTS replacement device to be plugged into, what the wiring looks like to get to each of those devices in the environment, and then an inventory of the type of end devices that you have. Are you dealing primarily with burglar and fire in your environment? Is it more fax devices and building entry, gate entry systems? All of that would help a POTS replacement provider scope out a project engagement, and more importantly, as you get to the installation phase, really streamline that whole process so you don't drag out a conversion project. There are a lot of different solutions that are available on the market for POTS replacement. And so there's some really important things to understand as you evaluate offerings out in the market. The first is regulatory compliance. As I mentioned earlier, elevators and fire panels are actually regulated. So there's different code. The local fire department and the inspectors have purview over this as the authority having jurisdiction. So putting in a solution that meets all of the compliance requirements, especially for fire, which is most stringent, is critical in your environment. The last thing that you would want is to have the inspector come in and fine you, or again, revoke the certificate of occupancy on a building. The second is you want this type of solution to be really flexible to handle any type of device in your environment, and you want something that's really easy to manage so you don't have to think about it. So the ability to remotely monitor all of your POTS replacement devices in your environment, understand when events are occurring via notifications like text messages or email, for instance, really streamlines this because it's something that you install, and honestly, it's kind of set it and forget it. So you only want to know about key events when they're occurring in your environment. The next is looking for an organization that has a strong reputation and scale that can obviously throw the resources behind making this product successful, making installation successful, and providing 24/7, 365-day support on a solution if you have any questions or issues that ever arise in your environment. As you go through the installation process, this is the key to making the project successful. So one of the big steps, obviously, is understanding the environment as we go through that inventory process, and then you parlay that over into the project management and rollout process. So you have a clear understanding of where all of the devices are, and most importantly, that you can test those devices before you go through a porting process. And once you go through a porting process, it's important to understand when you leave an incumbent carrier like Verizon or AT&T or Frontier, you are not going to go back. So you really want to verify that all of the devices are functioning properly in that environment before you issue a port of that phone number away. Selecting the right partner for a solution is obviously critical in that testing phase. And then you want to minimize downtime in this environment. So porting can be tricky, but with the right partners, it's a very elegant process to manage. You can time the port over so that there's minimal downtime for any devices. And again, that's important for life safety systems. Look at fire panels, elevators, safety phones that exist in environments. You don't want to have any scenario where someone tries to make an emergency call on one of those devices and you are unable to do so. So the key is to try to make this as easy as possible in an environment. Again, this is kind of a plug and play transition as you swap that wiring over. So picking the right type of solution can really make this an elegant, simple process and get through installation quickly so that your facilities or IT departments, whoever owns this ultimately in that environment, can get back to more important projects for the end customers. And so we built Ooma AirDial to solve for exactly this scenario. And this really leveraged a lot of the heritage that we have as a company in this space, dating all the way back to 2004, where we started with residential voice. And we have a lot of inherent expertise in designing hardware with cellular communication options across our product portfolio. We built AirDial specifically for the toughest use cases out there, which would be fire, alarm, and security panels. Believe it or not, there are a lot of very, very old panels that are out there that have been upgraded in years that often don't operate to spec or operate in very peculiar manners. And so we designed our holistic end-to-end architecture to be very adaptable to those types of devices and make them work where other solutions in the market can't. But of course, we made it a very flexible platform to serve just about any kind of device that you would want to plug into Ooma AirDial. Each unit comes with 4 ports. So you can serve up to 4 analog devices, and it operates over cellular and wireline connectivity for enhanced reliability. The other important thing to look at that we incorporated into our design is battery backup. That's required for elevators and fire panels, for instance, but it's a great benefit for about any other device. And that battery is actually a replaceable battery inside of the AirDial hardware. We all have had cell phones. We know that battery life deteriorates over time. So instead of replacing the whole unit, you pop out the battery and put a new battery into it. We also made this fully cloud managed and monitored. So we collect real-time telematics and telemetry on each AirDial unit. There's a portal called Remote Device Manager, which facilitates the installation, configuration, and ongoing monitoring of the AirDial solution. And of course, this being something that operates kind of behind the scenes, we built notifications into the platform so you can receive SMS and email notifications when key events happen. So you don't have to live in the platform to understand what's occurring in your environment. And all of this is backed by Ooma, which is a publicly traded company on the New York Stock Exchange. Significant experience doing this at scale on the hardware front, on the services front, on the support front, and the installation front. And we really want to make this as seamless as possible for end customers to go through this transition, save money, and have peace of mind that their environment is going to operate reliably with all of the devices that they want to plug into a solution. So the key for us is making it an all-in-one solution, which is different than other offerings on the market. So Ooma owns the entire technology stack. It is our hardware that we designed, our software running on it, and our core cloud service that supports over 2 million users today on our calling platform. Highly reliable, very mature technology for us. And an inherent part of our ethos as a company is simplicity. And we really poured a lot of effort into making AirDial very simple for customers to deploy in their environment. And then we support that with an end-to-end assessment, everything from a site survey if it's necessary to performing professional services for installation. We've seen kind of a mixed bag on customers. You have some where the IT department or facilities is happy to take this on, something they do kind of day in and day out. We have others where they're too busy with lots of projects and they'd rather somebody just handle the whole initiative cradle to grave for them. So we're very adaptable and flexible with that regard and really helping you kind of usher through this process in your environment with a reliable, top-notch solution that will give you peace of mind and save a lot of money compared to what you're paying today with the incumbent carriers. And with that, we'll open up for any questions you may have.
All right, Chris, thank you so much for this informative presentation, and thank you to our attendees for sending in questions. We'll now have some Q&A to address the questions you have sent in, and please continue to submit any questions that you may have. Okay, so to get started, what are the potential issues that could come up if we wait and see what will happen with our POTS lines?
Great question, and we've seen this in customer environments. So one, as I mentioned earlier, is if the copper line is damaged in some way and it's too much effort, frankly, for the underlying carrier to repair it, they just will refuse. And you can run into mission critical devices, fire and elevator, obviously. We've seen this in healthcare with fax machines too. So they do a lot of faxing still on physical machines because of HIPAA, for instance. And again, you can get fined or have your certificate of occupancy revoked in that sort of scenario. So it's better to be more pragmatic around this, to be honest. We've also seen, curiously enough, since it's summertime now, for a lot of homeowners associations, they'll have pools or apartment complexes, for instance. Most local building codes require an emergency phone at the pool. So we've had panic HOAs and apartment complexes where their line got shut off and they had no phone, so they couldn't open the pool. So that's kind of a good kind of residential oriented use case that we've seen come up as well.
Perfect. So another question we have here is, will I have to replace all of the copper lines that I have?
Eventually you will, yes. So they'll ultimately all get shut off. Again, it's up to the local carrier that you're using to decide that time frame. Here's a good example. AT&T shared in their investor day about 9 or 10 months ago that they plan to shut down 50% of their copper network by 2025. So the wheels are in motion with the carriers on this. Again, it's right now the FCC has left it up to their discretion for when they want to do this, but they have a vested interest to try to shut down the old network.
Okay, perfect. So another question is, if we lose power, will we lose emergency device coverage on things like elevator phones?
Great question, and it plays into the battery backup design that we have, so the answer is no. So we have battery backup operating inside of the AirDial unit. It is spec to a minimum of 8 hours of runtime, although in the field we see closer to 13 to 14 hours of runtime. And additionally, you can also plug it into an external UPS if you'd like more runtime than what we provided.
Perfect, awesome. So another question I have here is, how is the system upgraded as we move to different cell tech? So i.e. 3G to 4G to 5G.
Yeah, great question. So this is all 4G LTE right now. There's actually no inherent reason for 5G with these devices. The LTE network is going to be around for a very, very long time. Eventually, we'll toggle over to a 5G design, but it's great to think of this as an IoT use case, kind of different than other use cases. So we don't need a whole lot of throughput on the cellular network, and it'll be a very long time before they are able to shut down LTE.
All right, perfect. So another question is, for Ooma implementations, who retains ownership and services lines?
So the customer actually retains ownership of the lines, so they're paying Ooma for that directly. For implementation, that is a one-time project professional services fee. And then much like your copper lines, you actually pay for AirDial lines on a monthly basis for each line that you have at a fraction of the cost of what you're likely paying today.
Perfect. So another question we have here is, what makes AirDial different from the other POTS replacement solutions?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. And there are a few other key vendors out in the market. The big thing for us is it is 100% our technology in. As you look at the other solutions on the market, they build just a hardware solution that you have to plug into different pieces to make that operate. And for voice use cases, that's usually just fine. However, what we've seen is you get into fire panels, commercial burglar panels, modems, believe it or not, we see lots of those. Those devices struggle because they're nuanced devices. They operate on very, very old standards. And so if you don't own all the components end to end into the PSTN network, it's very, very challenging or near impossible to get those devices to work. And so we're often brought in to failed installations with these other vendors for precisely that case. And end customers don't want to deploy 3, 4, 5 different solutions to solve all of the devices in their environment. They want a single device. The other big thing is full cloud management and monitoring of your AirDial device. That is a piece that we own. That's our own software with the notification engine as well. So you want that peace of mind. And then finally, as a public company, we're the largest player in this space. We have a considerable amount of resources that we've invested into AirDial from a supply chain and manufacturing perspective to a research and development, QA, and support perspective. So you get to tap into our scale of what we do as a company, serving over 2 million users across all of our platforms.
Perfect. So I have time for maybe a couple few more questions. We'll start with this one. How do I know that my communications will be secure if I move away from analog lines?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. So here's the neat thing that we did with Ooma AirDial. All of the traffic is fully encrypted end to end coming out of the AirDial unit. So you get the benefit of the complete encryption, kind of similar to POTS lines or a standalone network. And so that's how we really help ensure security in a customer's environment.
Mhm. All right, perfect. So another question we have here is once we were once we switch to Ooma, then we can cancel all POTS lines and operate on cellular only. Is there redundancy available, i.e. cellular and internet?
Yeah, that's a great question. So yes, that's exactly what happens from kind of a project management process. Come into the environment, test and verify all the devices are functioning. You issue a port out of your existing number with AT&T, for example, that transfers over to Ooma service, and then you will cancel your AT&T lines as part of that. So AirDial does support two different connectivity methods today. You can operate primarily over cellular if you want with wireline think fiber or cable as a backup, or you can do the reverse where you're primary over your wireline and backup over cellular. In addition, we'll be introducing a new technology here shortly that allows us to fully send that traffic out both links at the same time. And so that's going to let us choose the best path for all of the traffic for us and no drop phone calls as you move back and forth between the links. And so that's one of the great enhancements that we're making to really strengthen the reliability story here. We have run into even higher availability environments. So it is possible to also do a side-by-side deployment of two AirDial units that are connected into each other. And so you can do active-active over two different cellular carriers, for instance, in that model. So a lot of options for how we can approach this depending on the needs of a customer environment.
All right, Chris. Well, thank you so much. It looks like we are just at about time. Thank you for this presentation today, and special thank you to Ooma for sponsoring this webinar. Of course, thank you to our audience for attending today and for submitting questions. If we were unable to get to your question today, someone from Ooma will reach out to you at a later time. A recording from today's session will be made available on our magazine's website, facilityexecutive.com. Thank you and have a great afternoon.